Hey y'all, it's Caroline. I am the missions fellow for the summer, and I am here to talk to y'all about the last discipline that we are talking about for the summer from the book Celebration of Discipline. And so the discipline that I am going to be speaking to y'all about this morning is the discipline of celebration. And when I think about disciplines, I definitely don't think about celebration as one of those. I think about sort of the more traditional ones, like that we've talked about, like fasting and submission. Celebration doesn't come to mind when I think of discipline. And that's kind of cool in that celebration is really unique because it's kind of the culmination, the product of all the other disciplines working in your life. So it's important to kind of start out when we're talking about celebration to kind of talk about the origin of celebration. Jesus Christ came into this world because, through a celebration. The angels were rejoicing, people were bringing gifts, people were celebrating his arrival. And in Luke 4, verses 18 and 19, it sort of talks about when Jesus started doing his public ministry, he started doing this thing called a jubilee. That's what he started with. And this jubilee is sort of this huge thing that happens where you cancel debts, you free slaves, you don't plant any crops. You do all of this because you are trusting in the Lord's provision. You're trusting in letting him provide for you during this time of getting rid of all these things. So you can see that celebration is a huge thing in Scripture. It's talked about a lot more than I think we talk about sometimes. And so going back to this concept of the Jubilee, it's letting go of everything and letting the Lord provide. And I think that that's incredibly important because then Scripture, it talks about the Jubilee of the Spirit. So what does that even mean? So when we trust in the Lord and sort of get rid of these things, like getting rid of our debts, getting rid of sort of these things in our life that bring us a lot of stress, that is the basis of celebration. So when we free ourselves from anxiety, that forms the foundation for our celebration. And so that kind of brings about this concept of joy. So when we free ourselves from anxiety, that is the basis for celebration, and that brings about joy. So when we're talking about joy, we need to view joy as being a strength in our lives. In Nehemiah 8:10, it talks about how the joy of the Lord is our strength. And when we celebrate the Lord, that brings about celebration. That brings about joy, and they kind of go hand in hand, really. Celebration brings joy, joy brings celebration. And so why is joy kind of this huge, important thing? Joy is kind of like how I would like to view it as sort of the motor that keeps everything running. Without joy, we're not able to do a lot of the things in our lives that we should be doing, that we want to be doing. If you kind of think about it, I'm in college right now. I am going to grad school next year, which is really exciting. And I'm in a lot of classes right now that I really don't want to be in. I had to take Physics 1 and Physics 2, and it was not fun at all. It definitely wasn't joy-bringing during the semester. So I kind of get confused personally when we talk about joy and everything, and then we talk about these moments in our lives. So back to my example, I have been in physics, and it was not particularly joy-bringing, but the reason I kept going strong in those classes is because I knew at the end of that I was going to be one step closer to achieving my education goals, to achieving my career goals, and so that is what ultimately brought me joy, is that end product. A lot of y'all probably play sports. Think about conditioning in the off season. It's not necessarily something that you want to do, and it's not necessarily something that brings you joy, but the product of what you're doing is ultimately going to bring you joy. When you condition, you make yourself a better athlete, you make yourself a better teammate, and that is like the product that we're looking for. So again, joy is kind of like the motor that keeps everything running. So what produces joy? You could think of a lot of things, but ultimately the one thing in our lives that produces joy is when we trust and obey the Lord. Obedience. And so I also kind of don't really think of joy and obedience as going hand in hand, sort of like I don't think of celebration and discipline going hand in hand. But going back to what I said at the very beginning, celebration is like the product of all of the spiritual disciplines working in our lives, and joy is the exact same. When we are obedient and we really stick to these spiritual disciplines that we've learned, that brings about joy. And so that's a really, really important thing. Without those spiritual disciplines like working in our daily lives, without us making a conscious effort to make them a part of our daily lives, it's going to be really hard for us to find joy in life as well. So going on, joy should be sort of this carefree celebration. So again, it's kind of contradictory. Obedience, carefree celebration. But they're really not as contradictory as you may think. Paul in Philippians 4 tells us to be careful for nothing and to free ourselves from anxiety. So again, that anxiety is coming up a lot. And when we do that, we are able to have this peace of God, which transcends all understanding, and our hearts and minds will be in Jesus Christ. This is like really, really important. So we need to find the little things in life to care about. Paul tells us to, also celebrate, what is good, what is honorable, what is trustworthy in our lives. So I think kind of what he means here is finding those small good things in life and celebrating them and thanking God for them constantly. When we do that, we're able to really fill our lives with celebration everywhere we look. For me, I take the same route to campus every day when I walk, and I walk by this really big tree, and it kind of smells like Fruit Loops, but I don't really know why. But that brings me joy every day, and I thank God for my walk every day, where I get to walk past this weird little Fruit Loop tree. And so that's kind of the cool thing, is that also once you start finding things to celebrate, you find more and more and more things to celebrate. Sort of this concept of that joy begets joy. Which is really, really awesome. And so that's what I would encourage y'all to do, is to really look for those like small things in your everyday life that you're going to see every day. If you take the same route to school every day, find something, whether it's like a mailbox or a house that you particularly like, really find those things and just thank God for them and constantly do that. And once you start doing that, you'll find more things that really bring about joy as well, and that you can celebrate, and soon your life will just be this constant celebration. And so that's kind of where I want to sort of summarize everything, is that celebration is the culmination of all the other disciplines, and that it gives us strength, and that joy and celebration are really hand in hand, and therefore obedience and celebration, discipline and celebration are really, really hand in hand. By practicing the other disciplines, by consciously making an effort to have those be a part of your daily lives, you free yourself from these sort of restrictive chains that you've had in your faith, and that brings celebration. And like I said, joy begets joy. So once that brings celebration, you're going to find more and more things, and soon you'll have this unbroken circle of just celebration and discipline in your life. And I think that that's a really cool concept. So thank y'all for listening, and I encourage y'all to find something today to celebrate. And yeah.